Hey, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Afghanistan Project Podcast, because anytime I have Will Selber here, it's special. I feel like at this point, Will, I don't really need to introduce you, but in the event that some of the new listeners who popped up with recent episodes want to know who you are, I can't imagine that they don't already. Will Selber's a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force. He is the founder of Grumpy Combat Veteran and Friends, and he is the guru behind Stories from My Brothers, Tales of the Afghan Security Forces podcast, as well as Shoulder to Shoulder podcast. So, well, it's always so good to have you here. You have such a wealth of knowledge and DGAF.
I think the latter part is absolutely true. As Bill Raggio said on this week's podcast, he said he's the proprietor of Grumpy Combat Veteran and Friends, and if you read his stuff, it's grumpy. I was like, hey, man, I want to do truth in advertising, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta be honest, right? I'm a reporter. That's how I do my
That's
thing.
exactly right.
I am glad to have you here. You have been covering, because I've seen the things rolling into my inbox, even if I haven't been able to read them all. You have been covering a lot of what's going on lately with the whitewashing of the Taliban, and I think that you, among many other people, think that that has something to do with the election coming up, and the fact that we kind of want to push this into the past and not have to address the fact that, you know, we screwed the pooch in a huge way, and that both candidates are not, you know, clean of that past. And so I want your take on that. You know, I think this is going to come out the day before the elections. Maybe it'll make people feel even more frustrated and angry than they already do, which is just it's so great. It's awesome.
It is.
So I want to. My first question would be, what's the thing that's made you most angry recently about all of this?
Yes. You know, I think for anybody who has been an Afghan watcher, the name Sirajuddin Haqqani shouldn't be a mystery. He's currently the Minister of Interior for Afghanistan. He was the deputy emir for the Taliban prior to their victory. It's the head of the Haqqani network. His father was Jalaluddin Haqqani. His father had extensive ties with Al Qaeda. One of the reasons why Osama bin Laden was able to land in Afghanistan was because Jalaluddin Haqqani. And so about a week ago or so, the New York Times, in their infinite wisdom, decided to do a profile on the man, the myth, the legend, the hope for Afghanistan. And so it was this sprawling profile where a writer decided that she supposedly interviewed 70 people, a bunch of scholars, nobody that I know. She interviewed 0 combat veterans, absolutely 0 Afghans, absolutely 0 Gold Star parents, nobody that had ever been killed by, or family members had been killed, raped, or tortured by Sirajuddin Haqqani. And so in this article, the author basically presents Sirajuddin Haqqani as this moderate influence inside the Taliban. She goes on to kind of brush through like one of his attacks that he did, some suicide bombings, but interspersed throughout this whole thing is you know, it was kind of our fault that he became an enemy. You know, we had the opportunity to bring him in, you know, and we kind of blew it. There's an anecdote in there that he sent his uncle Omari, who's also a terrorist, by the way, to Europe to go meet with some, I believe it's Lauren Miller, a State Department official, and he's, you know, according to this anecdote, you know, Omari's like, you killed bin Laden, you've overthrown the Taliban, what more do you want? And, you know, the State Department official's like, we can't answer that question yet. And, you know, interspersed throughout this article, this quotes from some real winners like Barnett Rubin, professor at New York University, who has been a Taliban apologist for quite some time. And he basically, one of my favorite quotes is, his ideology isn't the same as Osama bin Laden's, and more or less, now that we're gone, he's going to be somebody else. And one of the things that, there's this line of thinking that with all the factions inside the Taliban, and like you can, play them off against each other. And I would just tell you that, like, there are factions. It's like a party. Sure, there's some that don't like each other. That's true. But the idea that Sirajuddin Haqqani is going to overthrow Hibatullah Akhundzada is just imaginary. And it's just like, and they also assert this idea that like Sirajuddin's been on the sidelines trying to, like, tamp things down, try to talk Hibatullah off the ledge. And, one of the things that I'm going from memory here, but I think it says that at one point it's the majority of the Taliban officials are against Hibatullah Akhundzada's like hardcore ideology, but they're just their hands are tied because they just follow the leader. That's just amazing. Just for those that don't know, I mean, as the Minister of Interior, he's in charge of the police force, and so, the Ministry of Promotion of Virtue and the Punishment of Vice, which is the one that goes around and catches people, they don't have the muscle without Sirajuddin Haqqani's men. So all these floggings that has been going on, all the torture, the hunting of our former allies, that is with Sirajuddin Haqqani's blessing and using his men to go do that. The article asserts that he really wants to, he wants to, have women, have education and stuff like that. But, there's also a line in the article that says it's not that he really cares. It's just that he's being pragmatic. So it's not that he really cares about any of the women. He just wants to present himself off as like this moderate influence. And you can smell a lot of people in this. One of them is Barnett Rubin. Zalmay Khalilzad is, I mean, if he's not one of the guys, I'll just fall over in this chair. You can also, I can sense members of the intelligence community, probably the CIA, Deputy Director David Cohen a couple months ago, repeated the same thing, that they're in partnership with them. So I see a lot of posturing here and this hope that by presenting him as a new face, that when the Biden administration or whoever comes after decides to recognize the Taliban, they can put Sirajuddin Haqqani as the face of Taliban 2.0. And, it's no different. It's the same. They just have our weapons now. And they have, Pakistani ISI, Iranian Quds forces, Chinese and Russian support. So they're more powerful, more dangerous, but the same scumbags they've always been.
You said everything that just flew out to me when I read it too, and I've been listening to everybody else crap on this article. Everyone I think is an intelligent person. Yeah. Everyone I know who has said everything that's happened after Afghanistan has been nonsense from the U.S. government. And there are just a couple things that stood out to me too that you've kind of touched on them, but I want to the fact that Siraj is literally looking at his speaking points while talking to this woman. Mm-hmm. Who do you think gave him the talking points? He didn't come up with his own talking points. He's saying what he's supposed to say because they all follow the leader. You follow the leader or you don't have any authority. So that part is just galling. She does not understand the Taliban. No. The fact that he still has his position. If he were, in some kind of power struggle with Hibatullah, that would not, to my mind, that would not be happening. And then the fact that he says he wants women's education, when I have to reach out to Suhail Shaheen for an article, which still, I've said this on the podcast before, and I'll say it until I'm out of breath, it boggles my mind that I have to ask the Taliban for comment. That like this terrorist group, I have to ask them for comment when I know that everything that they're going to tell me is bull. And every time you talk to somebody like that, I asked Suhail Shaheen, hey, so tell me about women's education. And he came back to me and said, oh no, some women are being educated. It's like, yeah, probably like 5. okay. Like, so but they will tell you all day long. And I've talked to one of the first people who reached out to Michael and I when we started this podcast was an education director in, I think, Nangarhar, Taliban education director. And he's like, no, you don't understand. And I want to come on your podcast to tell the West. Or it was before the podcast. He wanted to talk to me for an article. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need to be gaslit beyond, like, I don't know, no. But I kind of want to bring him on. Like, go ahead, lie. They're all going to lie. They're all going to say, well, we want it. But they never do it. It's very easy to say something. Siraj can say all day long that he wants women to be educated. But that's not going to happen. And so this is just cramming all this nonsense down our throats. And I think that you're correct. It's just, this is more crap in favor of, oh yeah, well we can let them. They're not.
Yeah,
so
I think
bad.
the thing about Siraj is that he's cocky, and it's understandably so. He just defeated the United States, but for our listeners, for your listeners, it's important to underscore that this guy was the worst, right? The Haqqani network, primarily in P2K, Khost, Paktia, part of the Zadran tribe. This is a guy whose suicide bombings were, infamous throughout Afghanistan. I hunted him personally for years in Afghanistan, outside of Afghanistan. And this isn't like everybody's idea of like, well, sometimes they just do it for money and like they're just poor. That's just bullshit. And this guy is a hardcore radical Islamic terrorist who has been, as Admiral Mike Mullen said, a venerable arm of Pakistani ISI. So, this is in congressional testimony that, and it's open secret, the Pakistani ISI has been supporting the Haqqani network for years, right? CIA's had contacts. They say it in the article as well. And according to Sami Sadat, who I heard speak this week at the University of Texas, Ines Haqqani, one of his brothers, is a CIA source. This is according to Sami Sadat. I wouldn't put it past him. At this point, the only way that in June, Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is a specially designated global terrorist, flew to the UAE and then to Saudi Arabia. The only way he's able to do that is the United Nations Security Council pulls the sanctions off of them, and it happened. The State Department said that they didn't want to interfere. And so this is our doing. We have decided to climb in bed with the Taliban and the Haqqani network, and thus Al-Qaeda. When I say this to people, they usually think I'm wearing a tin hat, right? And they're like, "What? Are you on like Alex Jones?" I'm like, "No, And you have to explain it to people because they read idiots like Barnett Rubin and Zameh Khalilzad or Mike Vickers and all the rest of these fools who don't quite realize that Al-Qaeda pledged baya, right? Loyalty to the Taliban, and they always will. And unlike us, when they pledge loyalty, they stick to it. Mm-hmm. And this misunderstanding that somehow that we can use Sirajuddin Haqqani and Hibatullah Akhundzada to as a counterterrorism force. And I would just say, look, let's just say that could happen, which is garbage. Just take a look at what the Islamic State's been doing. They had the Moscow attack. They attacked in Iran. They pulled off almost simultaneous attacks in Iran and in Kandahar. And then just take a look at the close calls that we've had over the last 6 months, where 8 Tajik nationals were detained in June. They were finally deported. You had an Afghan man who was inspired by the Islamic State, but they actually came about saying that he had been in contact with somebody. This guy was a former CIA security guard, according to NBC reporting. His mother, an Islamic State sympathizer. So if these guys are like your counterterrorism force, they're doing a pretty bad job. You would think that they would give you a heads up when these people start coming through the southern border, or they start radicalizing them to do attacks. And so even as just a pragmatic matter, right, to use them this way, it hasn't worked. And it's not even looking at the morality of it, the fact that, 70,000 Afghans, over 1,000 allies, 2,000 Americans, countless hundreds of thousands of civilians were murdered and butchered by this man. And people wonder why there's a recruiting crisis. This is the reason. If you don't think that Gold Star parents know about this, you're fooling yourself. You don't think that Afghan combat veterans know about this? They absolutely do. And this is why you've seen a 22% drop in veterans' willingness to recommend service to their family and to civilians. I mean, family members see this. They see their fathers and mothers and sisters and brothers looking at this stuff and going, why did I do this? Why did my friends die? Why did I put myself in harm's way if we were just going to crawl in bed with these sons of bitches yet again?
Yeah, I think, and like another thing we haven't brought up too, Haqqani, Siraj's guest house is where Ayman al-Zawahiri was chilling when he got his ass turned into meat from overhead. And there are two ways of thinking of that, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, maybe Siraj turned him in. Maybe that was like us using him. But if that were the case, then why is Mahmoud Shah Habibi, an American citizen, still in Taliban custody and the Taliban won't admit it? Because they think he did it. They think he gave the targeting information. They don't think Haqqani had jack to do with it. Mm-hmm. Or Haqqani would not be the interior minister. So Haqqani's freaking scot-free in that incident. Anyway, it's a slight aside.
Yeah, I mean, if they've broken relations with Al-Qaeda, which they haven't, why did Saif al-Idil call for foreign fighters to go into Afghanistan?
Right, absolutely. And no one wants to talk about that except for Bill Raggio. But I'm sitting here, I've got the FBI most wanted terrorist stuff up. We still have him out there for a $10 million hit. And I don't know how much, Christina Goldbaum made for this piece in the New York Times, but I bet she could have made more if she would have gone and just put him into a bag and taken him home with her.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think it's fair to say that the American government is pro-Taliban. I don't know how else to say it. Like, you're giving them money. You're basically allowing them to travel to Saudi Arabia, which is close to American bases. There's multiple American Air Force bases. I wonder if those people's parents realize that the American government allowed a specially designated global terrorist to hodgepodge around in Saudi Arabia, less than 100 miles from American bases. They allowed him to do the Hajj, which just further emboldens him. It raises his stature. And so the question, when I kind of nug this out, I mean, it is an attempt to push him forward and to make him the face. There's no way that Haqqani is going to be in charge. He comes from a sub-tribe that's not that influential. He's got his P2K area down there. But like the idea that he's going to become the leader of the Taliban, that's just not going to happen. He's not interested in that. He's interested in money and power and, making more of that. And we seem hell-bent on letting him do it. I mean, and you have people like Barnett Rubin who, quote, said that Sirajuddin Haqqani is no longer a threat to the United States. I think if that's true, that Barnett should bring him into the United States. Let's just invite him in. Let's see what happens. It's just, I've hit the point in this little saga where I'm just, every time something like this pops up, I just I kind of hit my head on the floor, and then I look at all the problems that we have in the military with our recruiting, with morale, and I go, I wonder why. I wonder why people don't want to join, and why you have to like lower standards, throw money at people, and they're still barely meeting their recruiting goals because they've lowered them. And Secretary of Defense Austin does not have the internal fortitude to step up to a microphone and say that we lost the war. Instead, he says that the war concluded. Like a book.
That's just absolutely disgusting. Man, I had a massive brainwave and it went away.
That's all right.
I'm sure yes. So I want to get back to recruiting and I want to get back to the U.S., but there's one more thing I want to say that I think that Goldbaum misses the point on. You know, she talks about how Siraj won't go to Kandahar, and something you said made me think about that, because it's like, why would he go to Kandahar? He's not one of the Pashtun tribes that's based out of Kandahar. He's a Miram Shah guy. You know, that's where and it's like you said, he's not going to be the leader. He doesn't have that tribal network that is the traditional Taliban Amir al-Momineen background, right?
Yep.
But they can't afford to lose the Haqqani network. So there's always going to be a Haqqani network person. You know, they work together hand in glove, but they're very separate groups. And so the fact that she makes anything of the fact that he didn't want to go to Kandahar, it's not because he's not, you know, in Haibatullah's favor. How would he stay in his position? It's just all of this, as I've felt since I was in the intelligence community, is that senior leaders in this country just don't understand the Taliban, and they never have. Yeah, they don't want to, and they find it so much easier to write things like this, where, you know, sure, it's beautiful writing. Mr. Haqqani was a boogeyman, an angel of death, with the power to determine who would live and who would die. I'm like, oh my God.
I mean, like a boogeyman doesn't exist. So he's real. And the audacity of this lady to write this and not even talk to any, I mean, there's one quote in the entire thing that says that maybe we shouldn't trust him. And it's just, that's it. Out of the 70 people that you decided to talk to, I don't believe you. Yeah. Because, I mean, she didn't contact Bill Raggio. She didn't contact Thomas Jocelyn, who both testified before Congress on this and who are widely known as experts in the field. Did not talk to them, did not talk to some other voices that are prominent who are, you know, would push back against this shit. But she found Barnett, and, you know, he probably gave her that quote right before he went to China to meet with the Taliban's Chinese ambassador. The question that I have is, what was he doing there, and why was he there, and under what capacity was he there? Because I don't believe you that you just went there on your own. I just don't. Like, what were you doing there, and what were you telling the Taliban? I don't know. Maybe it was in between his hatred. Maybe while he was tweeting about how much he hates Jews. I don't know. Because this is a man who repeatedly retweets like vile anti-Semitic remarks, comparing Zionism to Nazism, to the state of Israel, a Nazi country. Now, as a Jew, you know, I'm used to people saying all sorts of stupid shit. But at this point in time, if you're going to say that, there is no other way to describe you as an anti-Semite. This isn't like, well, the two-state solution, or, well, they should, you know, lower casualties, or, well. No. You're calling the only Jewish state a Nazi state? I'm so sorry. That's who he is. So if you're wondering why he's like that, that's the reason why he's like that. And if you follow his Twitter feed, he's blocked me, but I have another account. You know, you can, it's just, all it is like, you know, casualties from, you know, the war in Gaza and Lebanon. But the thing that's I never see on his Twitter account is anything about any of the Afghans who are suffering in Afghanistan. Never once. Not once.
How interesting is that? Yeah, I have him up here now. And I'd like to just say, too, for anybody who's listening who isn't aware, the Chicago mayor just asked for the resignation of their president of the Board of Education because he called Zionist Nazis. So, we should hold people to the same. That is an allegation that is unbelievable and should absolutely be countered at any step of the process. But anyway, I'm interested, when you first said that he was meeting with the Chinese, I have covered a lot the Chinese investment in Afghanistan. And in the beginning, the Chinese were very much, they didn't say anything about domestic affairs inside of Afghanistan because they didn't care. It's like, why would we do that? They don't want anybody. The Taliban have always said, like, don't talk to us about our domestic affairs. We'll talk to you about international things, but our rights are our rights. So I wanted to search and see, and I do see that in September, the Chinese actually did say something about how the Taliban need to realize that women's rights and interests, are going to need to be addressed. I'm surprised because I was going to say Barnett, like, by sitting with them would have, and now it's easy to say something.
Well, I mean, look, just reading off of his, like, NYU profile, he is conceived the idea of developing production of essential oils in Afghanistan. With both Afghan and French investors, he founded Gulistan Ariana LLC, which established this industry in Jalalabad. I'm not saying that's why he's in there, but I'm going to throw that out there.
Essential oils?
Look, it's the same thing with Zalmay, right? A guy who he had a tweet this week. Oh my God, help me! This man said something to the effect of, I get blamed a lot by a lot of the Afghans for what happened, but it was their fault. I'm
sorry. Wait, the Afghans didn't even get to be involved in that conversation. So how did he manage that little verbal gymnastics?
It's the lack of shame that man has on his Twitter feed. It is just astounding to me. He weighs in on, like, what's, like, the Taliban needs to, like, do this. They can't do that. I'm like, what are you talking about, bro? Like,
you're the reason
we're there. Yeah. Here's something I've never, and I hang out with a lot of Afghans. This is something I've never heard once. Zalmay Khalilzad's a good dude. You guys nailed it on that one. Good pick.
Yeah.
As Bill Raggio calls him, he's the magic Afghan, right? Everybody loves him in the Biden and Trump administration, right? He's a bipartisan disaster.
It's so true. And that's the thing that I always find so damning among these people who peddled the bullshit for so many years. They still can't see that, like, oh, I screwed up. And then the people who were doing the hard work to try to unscrew it all up are the ones sitting here going, God damn, what did I screw up? Why? It should be the opposite. I guess we just have a bunch of narcissists that we're putting into power positions here that they just can't even see past their own nose. I don't know. I'm getting. No,
I mean, I think that what you have here is that nobody understands Afghanistan, really. Even we were there for 20 years, but, like, nobody even, believe me, last year, people didn't. It was like year one, explaining to people what Afghanistan's all about, and they just want it to go away. And so, like, just find somebody who can, like, just go talk to them. Look, just give them a Walmart, okay? Just give them a Walmart, maybe a McDonald's. Just give them some capitalism, damn it. And that will be the fix, right? And so it's just a continuation of us projecting our morals on our enemies, and the idea that somehow that they're just going to be like, you're right. Yeah, we don't want to kill you guys anymore. We want to be successful businessmen.
Yeah, we just needed quarter pounders with cheese.
That's exactly right.
Now our arteries are so clogged that we're happy. And
yep.
Yeah, it is so disconcerting, given that so many people put so much of themselves into that country, that the people who ran it all, that administered it all, just tend to not care, to not know, and to just continue to paper over it all. And So that's the thing I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
Also is, here we go into this election, and I thought we were going to have Trump versus Biden in the beginning, right? And so Biden, and I think that's why Biden didn't talk about Afghanistan, right? He didn't want to not get reelected because of what an utter failure that was. Now you have Harris, Trump. And obviously nobody's going to make their decision, right?
No.
Based on Afghanistan, I don't think. Not a single, well,
I mean,
the Afghans who've come here,
right.
Came on the SIV program and are hoping that maybe they'll be able to bring their families over faster.
Yep.
There are probably some people who really are going to think seriously about that aspect of it, and whether the SIV program will continue. What are your thoughts on what to think about come election time?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the Kamala Harris has had multiple opportunities to distance herself from the Biden Afghanistan fiasco, and she hasn't. I don't know why. I tried to. I talked to some people, and I won't name names, who do ads on behalf of Harris and stuff like that, and PACs, and I really tried to push this idea. Look, if you guys want, her to win, and you want to make some inroads, it would be really smart for her to just come out and be like, yeah, he screwed that up, or like, look, we did this wrong, and like, when I'm in charge, we're going to make Afghan women a centerpiece and all this other stuff. But that nobody wanted to touch it, right? Because they're ashamed of themselves, and rightfully so. And one of the things that, when I write about Afghanistan, I am a double hater. I just wrote something this week. It was like the Trump's Doha agreement was worse than you think. I've taken the Harris and Biden administration to the woodshed. So, but people, they're like, well, it's his fault. No, it's their fault. It's their fault. Here's the thing. Trump with Doha, that's his baby. He's the one who decided to pick Zalmay Khalilzad, the magic Afghan, as his special representative. He's the one who greenlit Mullah Baradar to be released. He's the one who came up with this stupid idea of the active defense, which handcuffed the Afghan security forces. Now, all of that was him. And the Doha Agreement, out of all the mistakes that we made in Afghanistan, we made a lot, that was really the one that really was the killer, right? And if we wanted to leave, we just could have left. We just could have been like, we're leaving. And like, you guys, we're going to give them stuff and we're out of here. But what we wanted to leave and not get shot at. Now, they did shoot at us. They shot at us with indirect fire, Sapphire against C-130s, and then also IEDs. That happened. Now, that wasn't really covered a lot, but it did happen. You can Google it. And so you get all that, and then it comes to Biden. And when you hear, God bless them, these Biden supporters that come at me a lot on Twitter, and it's like the Doha Agreement is a force field that protects them from anything. It's like all I have to say is the Doha Agreement, and then magically everything else goes away. I was in a little thing with Max Boot the other day. God bless that guy. He was like, it was a bipartisan disaster, and Biden was just upholding what Trump did, right? Because that's what Biden has done. The majority of the time is just uphold. The Doha Agreement, for anybody who's read it, is about 3 pages, and most of it is just this diplomatic language where we don't recognize the Taliban. So there's this whole phrasing where the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is known as the Taliban, which the United States doesn't recognize. That whole little phrase is repeated constantly. So once you strip that away, it's about a page and a half. The page and a half document has no legal standing. I hate to tell people that, but it wasn't ratified. It wasn't anything. And the Afghan government was a major non-NATO ally and had a bilateral security agreement. And so President Biden had no obligation, zero, to go through with it. He could have come out and been like, I'm not going to do this. They've already broken it, which they had.
Right.
They'd already had ties to Al-Qaeda. They never severed them. They continued to attack American forces. But instead, he said, I'm going to keep that magic Afghan. We're going to keep on going. And the attacks continued. Now, for those who don't remember, President Biden, in his infinite wisdom, was going to have the pullout on 9/11, which is almost as bad as when President Trump wanted to bring the Taliban to Camp David. Luckily, somebody talked him out of it, I suppose. But Biden's responsible for the withdrawal. That's him. Nobody, I mean, like, I hate to tell you that you can't blame Trump for that. Like, you're the one that decided to do a NEO at HKIA. You're the one that decided to pull out all the contractors. You're the one that's decided to pull out from Bagram. And then to make it worse is all of this stuff has happened, all of this stuff. And you just decided not to support any of the resistance groups. You've decided to wash your hands of Afghan women. And today, you know, in the most tone-deaf thing I've ever seen in quite some time, the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, which is in Doha, decided to tweet a happy Halloween. It's just like happy Halloween and like spooky season to everybody. I was just like, I just like, who is doing what?
It's like when in Operation Pineapple Express, right? They write about how there was a sip and paint or pour and paint, whatever the hell it was, scheduled for the day that the Taliban took over Afghanistan. And you're just like, and they had to cancel it. And it's like, you were still going to do that? Like, were you not paying attention?
No.
What the hell? Can you imagine all the embassy folks sitting there with their wine, painting their things as like the Taliban are just rolling into the city? Because I can.
I totally can. I mean,
it's,
you know, the last year in the embassy was, it was like,
how did I forget about that?
Yeah. The last year in the embassy was like a comedy of errors of, you know, us knowing that the end was coming, right? And then us like, I remember distinctly sitting in a meeting with General Yasin Zia, who is now the leader of the Afghan Freedom Front. And I won't name names, but a very, I would say, disheveled State Department official decided that this was the time to, this is like 3 months before the fall, 4 months before the fall. This was the time to bring up the fact that there weren't enough women in the ANSF.
Bruh.
I just like, I was like, oh no. Oh God.
Did they start trying to recruit? It's like, let's just put more targets on the women's backs and, you know, realize that like it's too late. It's too late. And then you would have just had more women who didn't have SIV coverage, who had no way out of the country, who are now being targeted by the Taliban. So I hope that didn't happen.
No, I mean, and that's the thing about both of these ministers, like, you know, Trump, I don't care who you vote for. God bless you, whatever. What I tell people is like, if you think either of these people are going to really reverse course, I'm so sorry. I don't believe it. You know, I know there's a lot of people who think that Trump's going to like, I don't know, arm the resistance. Maybe. I don't think so. So I'll tell you what I worry about with both of them. For Trump, I worry about Stephen Miller being in charge of the immigration program and this mass deportation. Whatever you think about illegal immigration, that's fine. But if you start doing mass deportations, just by the nature of the business, you're going to scoop up people that don't deserve to be scooped up. And, you know, we had the Afghan national who was here, who, got radicalized, as I mentioned earlier. And those are the type of news stories that I fearful inside of a Trump administration will use it to go after people that shouldn't. In the Harris administration, I would just fear that the same old, right? We're going to continue to do military exercises with the Pakistanis. Unbelievable to me, but here we are. That we will continue to provide them with, you know, millions of dollars of aid, even though they are responsible for killing America's sons and daughters and have paid no price for it. And so maybe she'll be better on Afghan women. That's what I got for you.
I hope so. I haven't heard her talk. Has she talked about them? I honestly have not.
No, she hasn't.
Anything.
But I've heard some people that I know who said that, like, you know, she doesn't want to, like, you know, create this big issue. But like she's, more inclined to kind of make that a centerpiece. But I'm like, how are you going to do that? Like, what are you going to do?
I don't even know, but for all these women who are up in arms about their reproductive rights, of which I am absolutely one, right?
Sure.
But think about it. We're upset about that. Like, what's happening in Afghanistan to those women, right? I think there needs to be a groundswell of American women who say, hey, look, we see this maybe coming our way. We're going to stand with the people who are facing it over there, and we're going to make things happen for them. Raise money for education for girls under the table. I am part of a board member of an organization that is educating girls under the table. Like, they can use funds to go build more schools. There are so many things we could be doing, and we're just and I understand, like, these are things that impact us right away, but we don't understand.
People think that, like, if we do this, that we're gonna put American boots on the ground, and I just hate to tell people but like, nobody wants us back there.
Right.
I mean, they saw that movie before, and there were some interesting parts to it, but the ending sucked. So I think that, I don't think I'm friends with almost. I know and talk with all the resistance group leaders, and not a single one of them has been like, Will, we need to get you back in there, buddy. No, what they say is they need money and they need some weapons and stuff like that. And like, the thing is that the Taliban isn't 10 feet tall. They can be defeated. They can be overthrown, but it's going to take somebody who is willing to do it. And right now it's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen until it goes boom, but that's coming.
Yeah.
Because all the time, there was, I think it was 3 weeks ago, there was a Maryland man who was arrested before getting on a plane to go to Somalia to get his jihad on. I mean, there's been the Afghan man that was arrested in Oklahoma City. His brother was arrested in France. And, you had the Pakistani man who was going to come into from Canada to kill some Jews. All of this stuff. And then you have all these, protesters who are decided to cosplay as Hamas and Hezbollah sympathizers. If you're going to put that on, now most of them are just over-caffeinated kids, but not all of them, right? And so you have this mix going on. And look, don't listen to me. Listen to the FBI director, right? I mean, these guys are overworked. They're stretched thin. And there's some real problems. And it's just not the Islamic State. People think because Al-Qaeda hasn't been that active means that they're not there. They are absolutely there. And just, hey, read what they say. This ain't me conjecture. This is Saif Idol saying, come to Afghanistan, train. Yeah. And it's not going to be on an airplane. It's not going to be the same way. It's going to be something different. And whether you like it or not, the southern border isn't what I would call, airtight, right? I mean, I have had Afghan allies make it, and I'm glad they did. They got the humanitarian asylum. But if people that I like make it, then other people can make it too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the guy who just shot the Jewish man in Chicago came in through the San Diego area illegally. He did not come through a border crossing, and now he's a Mauritanian man who tried to kill an American and then got into a shootout with police. So it can happen. And yes, we caught the Pakistani guy, right? And yeah, I feel for all the folks right now who are trying to keep things while you have that homegrown support of terror. I watched one guy who's a member of AMP, I can't remember what the acronym is, Americans, Muslims for Palestine, I think. And he got in front of a group of people in Detroit in the early summertime and told them, some of you might not be here next year. And that, when Palestine sent its people here, it was sending their martyrs, and they knew what the job was. And it's just like, where there's so much going on in this country right now. And I feel for everybody who's trying to keep us safe. There's a lot.
There is, and there's a lot of threats, and it's, it's just not it's not just in Afghanistan, you have a distinct Iranian threat,
Yep.
Tend to assassinate President Trump.
Yep.
And
No matter if he wins or not, I think they recently
right, no
said.
matter if he wins or not. And the Iranians, they're not good at a lot of things, but they are pretty good at this type of warfare. And they've tried to do this multiple times. And for the life of me, I will never understand why we allow Iran to kill Americans and we don't respond in kind. But I at this point, I just throw my hands up and just, we don't want to escalate anything, even though they killed 3 Americans in Jordan this year. But it's an Iranian proxy.
Through a proxy, right?
Right.
But it's like with, what was the ballistic missiles that I can't remember. I just did something about it. I don't want to misquote.
You mean the attacks against Israel? Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about the
Americans that were killed? Which what killed them?
Yeah. Oh, yes. It was a drone.
Okay. Yeah.
In Jordan.
Right, the drone attack. Yes.
Yep.
Which was it? Was it an Iranian made? I mean, yeah.
Yeah. It was Kataib Hezbollah.
Yeah. It's sickening to me. The Iranian threat is so pervasive, and yet, you don't want to start. There's so much. It's a really nasty time, and you can understand why Afghanistan falls to the back burner, but it doesn't deserve to fall to the back burner for all of those women who we promise to bring it back to Afghanistan now, because this is the Afghanistan Project Podcast, but all of those women that we promised that we were gonna raise the maternal mortality, or decrease the maternal mortality rate, which we did. Bring them education, which we did.
Yep.
And then just watch them get pulled right back into that morass, or fall into that morass, I guess, if we're going to continue the metaphor or the analogy. It's so despicable. It's so sad for the people who are now having to be recruited by the Taliban if they want to work, for the people who worked with us who can't work at all. I just saw images, which, I know you've seen these too, and I've seen a lot of them in the last 3 years, to the point that you become inoculated against it, but of another brother of a former American employee who was attacked and beaten to the point of being hospitalized, covered in bandages, and now they have to figure out how to get him out of the country so he doesn't get killed. But he can't come here because his brother is not an American citizen yet, and when he is an American citizen, he'll have to wait the 7 years or whatever the length of time is to be able to come over for a sponsorship for a sibling visa. That's how long the wait is for sibling visas now. And it's like, or, the CSPA, I don't know if you saw, the IRAP is trying to deal with the Child Status Protection Act. We told people, hey, if you have an SIV, you get to come here. But we might not have explained to them that if your child is 18 on the date that you get your COM approval and can actually submit your SIV up until 2022, they don't get to come. So you're in danger, but your child has to stay.
Yep.
We've been just
death by bureaucracy.
Allies. We've been really bad allies. And
yes, we have. So when was the last time you would say that we've been a good ally?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's hard to say, because you could talk to some South Vietnamese. You could talk to the Afghans. You could talk to maybe what the Ukrainians thought of our advice and the counteroffensive and our continued inability to provide the type of munitions that they needed to win when Putin overextended and he was absolutely vulnerable. Or you could ask the Israelis and what they think when we put restrictions on the Rafah operation, which created a spike in casualties. Or you could ask, don't do it, or, don't go into Lebanon. Well, you have to let your allies fight their wars. And it's like I was in Israel in June, right? And I told every Israeli that I talked to, take our money, take our weapons, listen to our bullshit very politely, and then just do exactly what you need to do to win. And if you don't, go ask the Afghans how they feel about that.
I wonder if you're the reason why they're doing that.
There you go.
I don't think they are doing that. I think that they are doing such a really important. I think they're working hard to minimize.
Yes, I agree.
Casualties and try to get a terror group that has no qualms operating under hospitals and inside children's bedrooms, putting their tunnels in children's bedrooms and educating an entire populace to hate another group of people.
Yep.
Yahya Sinwar. So not to once again bring in modern events and, did you hear about the gentleman who was kicked out of the Jerusalem Coffee House in Oakland, California on the 26th? For wearing a Star of David?
David, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they have on their menu the iced intifada. So cute. It's such a cute little reference to 1,000 Israelis dying during 2 periods of armed uprising. But they also had the sweet Sinwar. And in case anyone here is not aware, the butcher of Khan Yunis used to, torture and murder Palestinians who he thought were informants for Israel. Yeah. And was in jail for 2 decades in Israel for killing 2 Israeli soldiers and 4 Palestinians. Yeah. And also told Ismail Haniyeh in April in a letter that these casualties, these civilian casualties are necessary. And basically that they water the ground for a free Palestine in the future. So everybody who's out there in the U.S. decrying civilian casualties, please know that Sweet Sinwar wanted them.
It was the whole strategy the entire time.
It's so sickening. It's just such propaganda. Anyway, I should make this the worldwide news podcast. I keep thinking about that because it's there is a lot. Afghanistan is incredibly important, but you can't lose sight of
all the rest of it.
World right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, it is, and if Harris loses, which I think there's a pretty good chance, you point a straight line from Afghanistan into all the other problems that you have on the international scene, and people may not vote on foreign policy because most of the time Americans are just navel gazing. But when they do stick up their head and they see Russia and Ukraine, they see the biggest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. They see 10,000 North Korean soldiers in Russia about to join in. Let me tell you something. That's not exactly what I would call confidence inspiring. And at the end of the day, maybe Americans just don't like it when we retreat from the battlefield.
Yeah. It was an ignominious ending. Yeah. To something that really mattered to a lot of people. Yep. And I wonder what will happen with Iraq.
He's pulling out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to start. I've been wanting to cover because now you've got the SIV program in Iraq and all the people who helped us there and what happens to them. What happens to. It's just. It's end nation behavior. I feel like.
Time is a flat circle.
It's a very depressing.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Right. Oh, yeah. I thought about bringing some candy down here.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Well, do you have any parting words?
My parting words are this. Is that, we talk a lot about a lot of bad things in Afghanistan, and there's a lot of bad stuff going on. But, I listened to Sami Sadat this week. He had a good speech. I talked to Yasin Zia. I talked to a lot of people. I know you do too. I talked to General Alizai, Hibatul Alizai, recently. And one of the things he told me that inspired me was, it's not going to be me and you that liberate Afghanistan. It's going to be our sons and daughters. And I believe in that. I believe that the people that washed up on our shores, those are the ones that are going to help change the country. And I just hope to be alive when it happens. It's a marathon.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. And I've said it on the podcast before when I started asking Afghans, did you want to come here? Because we have this idea as Americans that everybody just wants to come here. Right. It's a great place to be. Yeah. I don't know many Afghans who are I love America. It's a huge adjustment for them.
Huge.
They love their homeland.
Sure.
They love it in a way that I don't even know if Americans love their homeland that way. Mm-hmm. They want to go back.
Yes.
They want to go back and they want to fight for their country, and
Yes.
they want to enjoy their country that they knew and not the country that is there now. So that is important. And honestly, I might bitch and moan about the fact that we left women behind, but we did give them education. And here's the interesting thing to all the Taliban who are listening right now: you can't take that out of their heads. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to pass it on. And you can try to put jihadist ideology into the little boys that you put into class, but when they go home and they have moms who say, screw that, how far are you going to get? Like the love of democracy, even if it was an imperfect democracy,
Sure.
is there. You can't beat that out of people. It's still there. And there's going to be a time. The Taliban are going to pay the future. In Afghanistan's most wanted militant. Now it's best hope for change. Like, no, Gold Bomb, it's not. And the best hope for change is all the people that
That's
we help
exactly
to
right.
still have that spark of love for their country. And now they're here, and that's what they care about. Well, as always, so good. To everybody who thought that this was a very strange, I don't know, I feel like I really went off course a lot in this one, but
That's all right.
there were a lot of things that needed to be said.
Yes.
It's, I think that people don't understand how you can support Afghanistan and support Israel and also care about Palestinian civilian death, because I will say that's not okay. It's tragic. It's suffering. It's not okay. But let's talk about why it happened, right? Anyway, I think it's important
It is.
that all of those things can be talked about at the same time. And if you don't like me or you don't like Will because of it, you are it's your loss.
There's a long line. It wraps around the corner. Believe me. You're not alone. There's a whole fan club. Don't worry about it.
I love it when I go and I'm like, oh, let's check this person out on Twitter, and I'm blocked. I'm like, wait, what did I do? What? I don't even know you. How did you block me? I must be cool. Anyway, thanks guys for coming to watch this one, and Tasha Kaur, hope to see you again soon.